Anakin Skywalker stood on the balcony of the lake villa in Naboo, watching the gentle waves lap at the shore as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. The mission to protect Senator Padme Amidala had stretched for weeks, and with each passing day, he felt the conflict within him growing like a storm about to break. The Jedi teachings about detachment, which had once seemed wise and necessary, now sounded hollow and artificial in his ears, especially when compared to the warmth he felt every time Padme entered the room. He had been taught that emotions led to the dark side, that love was the first step toward fear, anger, and suffering. But when he looked at Padme, all he saw was light, hope, and the possibility of a life he had never dared to imagine. The Jedi Code demanded that he deny his feelings, that he suppress them and pretend they didn't exist. But Anakin was beginning to realize that suppressing something as fundamental as love didn't make him stronger, it only made him divided and broken inside. He could feel the force around him, in the insects buzzing through the garden, in the running water of the lake, in the trees swaying in the breeze, and for the first time in his life, he wondered if the Jedi truly understood the Force as well as they claimed. Padme joined him on the balcony, her eyes following his gaze to the horizon, and for a long moment they simply stood in shared silence. "You're struggling with something?" she finally said, her voice gentle but observant, that quality that made her so effective as a senator, able to read people and situations with remarkable clarity. "The Jedi Order saved me," he began slowly, each word weighted with years of gratitude and growing doubt. "They freed me from slavery, gave me purpose, taught me to use my gifts. But the more I think about it, the more I realize they just traded one set of chains for another." Padme reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his, and he could see tears shining in her eyes even as she smiled. "Anakin, you don't have to choose between being a Jedi and being human," she whispered, though her own voice trembled with uncertainty. "Maybe there's a way to be both." He shook his head, bringing her hand to his lips in a gesture that was both reverence and desperation. "No, Padme, I've spent years trying to find that balance, trying to serve the Order while hiding who I really am. The Council senses my conflict. Obi-Wan constantly warns me about attachment, and I lie to them every day pretending I can be what they want me to be." He took a deep breath, the decision that had been forming in his heart finally crystallizing into absolute certainty. "I can't live divided like this anymore. I can't continue denying the only thing that makes me feel truly alive. I'm going to leave the Jedi Order, Padme. I'm going to choose you. I'm going to choose a life where I can be honest about who I am and what I feel." The magnitude of those words hung between them, the choice that would redefine not only their future but potentially the destiny of the entire galaxy. "Are you sure?" she asked. "If you do this, there's no going back. The Council won't simply let you return if you change your mind." Anakin smiled then, an expression so genuine and free of conflict that it transformed his entire face, making him look both younger and at the same time wiser than she had seen him. "I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life," he replied, pulling her into his arms, feeling how their bodies fit perfectly, as if they had been created for this moment. They spent that night planning their future, whispering dreams and possibilities under the stars of Naboo, while the rest of the galaxy spun unaware of the choice being made. In the following days, Anakin composed his formal message to the Jedi Council, each word carefully chosen to convey respect for the Order while firmly asserting his decision to leave. He sent the message through encrypted channels directly to Obi-Wan, knowing his master would be devastated, but hoping their bond was strong enough to survive this rupture. Then, with Padme by his side and his heart finally at peace with his decision, Anakin Skywalker began planning the next chapter of his life, starting with a journey to Tatooine to rescue his mother and bring her to the wedding that would represent not an end, but a glorious and uncertain beginning. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended only by those they trusted most, and Anakin had insisted on one more guest who needed to be there. Days before, he had departed from Naboo in secret, piloting a small cruiser toward the desert world that still haunted his dreams. Tatooine appeared before him like a wound in space, the twin suns burning over endless dunes of sand that held both his origins and his deepest fears. The moisture farm where she now lived with her husband appeared on the horizon, but something was wrong, a disturbance in the Force that made his blood freeze. He pushed the engines harder, his instincts screaming danger as he saw figures moving near the property, their shapes unmistakable even at a distance. Tusken Raiders, the Sand People who had terrorized settlers for generations, were dragging someone toward their banthas, and Anakin's heart stopped when he realized it was Shmi. Time seemed to fragment as he landed the cruiser with a force that cracked the desert floor, his lightsaber igniting before his feet touched the sand. The blue blade hummed with his fury as he ran toward the raiders, the force propelling him faster than any speeder could. The Tuskens turned at his approach, their guttural cries mixing with the howling wind, but Anakin was already among them, his blade moving with precision born of years of training and desperation born of love. He struck down the raider holding his mother, the warrior falling with a choked cry, and Shmi collapsed onto the sand as her captor released her. The other raiders hesitated, seeing this demon with a burning sword, and in that moment of hesitation, Anakin made a choice that would define his future. Anakin deactivated his lightsaber and turned to his mother, who was struggling to sit up, blood running from wounds on her arms where the raider's grip had been too tight. He knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he assessed her injuries, the fear of losing her threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained control. "Mother," he whispered, his voice breaking on the word. "I'm here. I've got you." Shmi looked at her son, this young man who had left as a boy and returned as something more, and she smiled through her pain. "Ani," she breathed, raising her hand to touch his face. "I knew you would come. I felt you in my heart." He lifted her carefully, cradling her as he had once been cradled, and carried her toward the property where Klieg and Owen were emerging, weapons in hand and faces pale with shock. After the medical droid had tended to Shmi's wounds and declared she would recover completely, Anakin sat with his family and explained everything. He told them about Padme, about his decision to leave the Order, and about the wedding that awaited them in Naboo. The lake region of Naboo became a sanctuary for the Skywalker family, a place where the traumas of Tatooine could begin to heal and new life could flourish. Months after the wedding, reports began flooding the HoloNet channels about a separatist movement gaining strength in the Outer Rim. Padme, still active in the Senate despite her new status as a wife, spent long hours in encrypted communications with Bail Organa and other loyal senators, her concern growing with each passing day. Anakin remained by her side during these conversations, his tactical mind already analyzing patterns of separatist attacks and predicting their next moves. When news broke about a clone army mysteriously commissioned for the Republic, discovered on the storm-swept world of Kamino by Obi-Wan Kenobi, the pieces began to fall into place for a galactic conflict of unprecedented scale. The Battle of Geonosis erupted with brutal intensity, Jedi and clone soldiers facing separatist droids in the first true engagement of what would become the Clone Wars. Anakin watched the reports with clenched fists, knowing Obi-Wan was there, that his former master was risking everything while he remained safe in Naboo. Part of him yearned to enter the fight, to ignite his lightsaber once more in defense of the Republic. But Padme's hand on his arm reminded him of the choice he had made and the responsibilities that came with it. As the war spread across the galaxy like a plague, consuming system after system, Padme made a discovery that changed everything. She was in her room one morning, her hand pressed against her stomach, tears streaming down her face as she processed the results of the medical scan. Anakin found her there, his presence in the Force immediately sensing her emotional turbulence, and he rushed to her side thinking something was wrong. "We're going to have a baby," she whispered, showing him the datapad with its unmistakable readings, and his world shifted on its axis. The birth came on a night when both moons of Naboo hung full in the sky, their silver light painting the lake in shades of mercury and dreams. The medical droid announced it was a boy, placing the wriggling baby in Padme's arms, but before anyone could catch their breath, the contractions began again. "There's another one?" the droid stated with mechanical calm, and Anakin's eyes widened in shock as he realized they were having twins. Minutes later, a second cry joined the first, this one even more insistent, and a girl was placed beside her brother. Luke and Leia, they named them, two lights born in a galaxy consumed by shadow, and as Anakin looked at his children for the first time, He felt his connection to the Force deepen in ways the Jedi texts had never described. Padme, despite her exhaustion, returned to her senatorial duties as much as possible, using encrypted channels to coordinate with other loyal senators, while Naboo's security forces worked to keep the planet neutral in the growing conflict. Anakin found himself taking an increasingly active role in this security, his skills too valuable to remain completely dormant even while honoring his commitment to family first. Missions allowed him to keep his combat edge while never straying too far from his children, a balance that somehow felt more authentic than the absolute detachment the Jedi preached. At night, after the twins were asleep and Padme had retired to review senatorial reports, he meditated in the gardens, his connection to the Force growing stronger and more subtle with each passing day. Anakin's training hadn't ended with his departure from the Order. It had merely transformed into something the Jedi could never have anticipated or approved. In the quiet moments between family responsibilities and security operations, he began exploring aspects of the Force that the Jedi taught should be feared and avoided. He delved into ancient texts that Padme had access to through her senatorial privileges, holocrons from the Jedi archives that discussed Force traditions older than the Order itself. His mother's presence proved invaluable during this transformation, as Shmi provided an anchor of unconditional love that allowed Anakin to explore the darker aspects of his power without fear of losing himself. They sat together in the gardens while the twins napped, and she told him stories of Tatooine, of how she had survived as a slave by accepting her circumstances without letting them define her spirit. Luke's sensitivity to the Force manifested early, even before his second birthday, objects moving when he reached for them and emotions projecting with surprising intensity. Anakin recognized the signs immediately and began training the boy with a gentleness his own master had rarely shown. As the Clone Wars intensified and the years passed, Anakin's power grew to levels that would have alarmed the Jedi Council if they were aware of it. His connection to the Force became so deep that he could sense disturbances across vast distances, feeling the deaths of millions in battles he had no part in. His lightsaber technique evolved beyond the 7 traditional forms, incorporating elements of each while adding his own innovations born of necessity and instinct. When Luke and Leia were approaching their 4th birthday, Anakin had achieved something the Jedi Council had feared and the Sith had dreamed of. He had become a nexus of Force power so concentrated that his mere presence could alter the fabric of reality around him. He had surpassed Yoda in connection to the Force, surpassed even the ancient masters whose legends filled the Jedi archives, not through aggression or domination, but through acceptance and balance. His ability to see the future became increasingly refined, no longer obscured by the ambiguity that had plagued the Council's visions, because he had learned to interpret probabilities instead of seeking absolute certainty. The war had been going on for 3.5 years when the message arrived, encrypted with codes that only a few people in the galaxy knew, delivered by a tired-looking Obi-Wan Kenobi whose holographic form flickered in Anakin's office. "Hello, old friend," Obi-Wan began, his voice carrying exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. "I hope this message finds you well, you and your family. I've respected your choice to leave the Order, to build a life outside the war, but I'm afraid I must ask you to reconsider, even if temporarily." Anakin listened with growing tension as his former master explained the situation unfolding in Coruscant, how Chancellor Palpatine had become increasingly powerful, his emergency powers expanding with each passing month. The Jedi Council had begun to suspect that the Chancellor wasn't what he seemed, that his manipulation of the war ran deeper than mere political opportunism. "Master Windu has been investigating connections to the Sith," Obi-Wan continued, his image looking around as if fearing being overheard. "And we believe Palpatine himself may be the Sith Lord we've been searching for. But we need proof, and more importantly, we need someone powerful enough to confront him if our suspicions are correct. Anakin, I know what I'm asking of you. I know you've built something beautiful in Naboo, but the galaxy needs the chosen one now more than ever." Padme was by his side as they watched the message complete, Obi-Wan's final words echoing through the office. "May the Force be with you, always." She took Anakin's hand, knowing without asking what his decision would be, seeing in his eyes the conflict between duty and desire that had defined so much of his life. "You have to go," she said simply, though her voice trembled slightly. If Palpatine is truly orchestrating this war, if he's the darkness behind everything, then you're the only one who can stop him. The Jedi Council, even Master Yoda, they're bound by protocols and politics. You're not. Anakin pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing this moment before everything changed. I'll take our D2 with me, he said, referring to the astromech droid that had been his companion since his Jedi days. And I'll contact you every day. This won't be like before, Padme. I'm not that impulsive Padawan anymore. I'll confront Palpatine, end this if I can, and come home to you and the children. They spent the night explaining to Luke and Leia that Daddy had to go away for a little while, the 4-year-olds accepting it with the resilience of youth, though Leia clung to him tighter than usual during their bedtime story. Obi-Wan met him at a discreet landing platform in the industrial sector, their reunion marked by an embrace that spoke of years and regret and affection that transcended their philosophical differences. You've grown stronger, Obi-Wan observed, sensing the power that radiated from his former Padawan like heat from a sun. I can feel it in the Force. The Council briefed him on their findings, how they had tracked financial connections between separatist accounts and shell corporations controlled by Palpatine's associates, how the timing of battle droid shipments suspiciously coincided with Republic clone deployments to create maximum casualties on both sides. Master Plo Koon presented intelligence suggesting Palpatine had been in contact with Count Dooku through encrypted channels, communications that discussed the eventual elimination of the Jedi Order. We believe he's engineered this entire war to justify emergency powers, Windu explained, his hands clasped behind his back. Powers that will allow him to transform the Republic into an empire with himself as absolute ruler. But we need concrete evidence before we can act, and we need someone who can confront him if it comes to open battle. The Council has debated this extensively, and despite your departure from the Order, we agree you're the only one with enough power to face a Sith Lord of Palpatine's apparent strength. Anakin listened to everything, his tactical mind already formulating plans, considering approaches and contingencies. I'll need unrestricted access to the Senate building, he stated, his voice carrying an authority that made even Windu defer slightly. And I'll need the Council to prepare for the possibility that when I confront Palpatine, he'll trigger whatever contingency plans he has. If he's orchestrated this war, he won't go quietly. The opportunity came sooner than expected, when Palpatine summoned Anakin to his private office under the pretext of discussing Naboo's continuing neutrality. The Chancellor's smile was as warm as ever when Anakin entered, that avuncular expression of benign concern that had fooled so many for so long. Anakin Skywalker, Palpatine greeted him, rising from behind his desk. It's been too long, my boy. I heard you left the Order to start a family. How wonderfully ordinary of you. The words carried a subtle mockery that Anakin caught immediately, a test to see if he could still be provoked. He smiled calmly. His hands relaxed at his sides, though his connection to the Force was hyper-alert to every shadow in the room. Chancellor, I appreciate you taking time to meet with me. I know the war has demanded much of your attention. They engaged in pleasantries for several minutes, discussing Padme's work in the Senate, the twins' growth, the state of agricultural production in Naboo. All the while, Anakin's senses were extending through the Force, mapping the room for surveillance devices, security systems, and most importantly, the swirling nexus of dark side energy emanating from Palpatine himself. You know, Palpatine said after a pause, moving to the window overlooking Coruscant's endless cityscape, the Jedi have served the Republic for 1,000 generations, but their time is ending. They're too inflexible, too bound to dogma to see what the galaxy truly needs. His tone remained conversational, but Anakin could feel the dark side beginning to coalesce around them, like storm clouds gathering before lightning strikes. The Republic requires order, Anakin, not the chaos of democracy where weak senators debate while systems burn. Not the arrogance of Force users who claim moral authority while failing to prevent suffering. Real order imposed by someone with the vision and strength to maintain it. Anakin moved to stand beside the Chancellor, seeming to contemplate the city while actually positioning himself to react instantly to any attack. That sounds like the philosophy of the Sith, he observed calmly. Absolute power concentrated in the hands of those deemed strong enough to wield it. "Are you familiar with the Sith, Chancellor?" The air in the room seemed to freeze, and Palpatine turned to look at him with eyes that had discarded their mask of kindness, revealing the yellow gaze of Darth Sidious beneath. "Oh, my dear boy," Palpatine said, his voice dropping to a register that resonated with dark power. "I am far more than familiar with the Sith. I am the Sith. I am the culmination of 1,000 years of planning, the heir to Darth Bane's vision, the master of Darth Plagueis who foolishly believed he could cheat death itself. I orchestrated this war, manipulated both sides, engineered the very clone army that fights for the Republic. And now, with Order 66 ready to be executed at my command, I will eliminate every Jedi in the galaxy simultaneously while transforming this corrupt Republic into the First Galactic Empire." Lightning suddenly arced from Palpatine's fingers, not directed at Anakin but at the walls themselves, disabling every security system and communication device in the room with a gesture. "Join me, Anakin. You are powerful, more powerful than any Jedi, perhaps even more powerful than me if properly trained. Together we could rule this galaxy as master and apprentice, bringing true peace through strength. Your family would want for nothing, your children would be protected, your wife elevated to royalty. All I ask is your loyalty." The offer hung in the air between them, the same seduction that had claimed countless Force users throughout history, power promised at the cost of conscience. Anakin looked at this being who had styled himself as a mentor to him in his youth, who had whispered poisonous doubts about the Jedi Council into his receptive ears, and felt nothing but disgust and pity. "You think you understand the dark side," he said, his voice steady and almost sad, "but you're just another slave to it. You speak about strength and peace, but all you've created is death and suffering. Real strength isn't domination, it's protection. Real peace isn't imposed through fear, it's built through understanding. The Sith end tonight, Chancellor. Not because the Jedi are righteous, but because you threaten my family and every family in this galaxy with your ambition." His lightsaber ignited with a hissing snap, the blue blade casting sharp shadows through the room, and Palpatine's expression twisted into something inhuman. "Then you will die with the rest of the Jedi," the Sith Lord hissed, his own red blade emerging from within his robes. "I have foreseen every possibility, and in none of them do you survive this encounter." The Force itself seemed to scream as they clashed, Palpatine's Makashi precision meeting Anakin's fusion of all 7 forms into something transcendent, their blades moving so fast they blurred into streams of color. The battle destroyed Palpatine's office in seconds, furniture disintegrating under waves of Force energy, windows shattering as their power exceeded physical constraints. Palpatine unleashed Force lightning of devastating intensity, streams of purple-white energy that could disintegrate flesh from bone, but Anakin simply absorbed them into a barrier of pure Force energy, redirecting it back to its source. "Impossible!" Palpatine snarled, forced to defend against his own attack. "No Jedi has this level of control." Anakin pressed forward, his attacks relentless but controlled, each strike calculated to force the Sith Lord into a disadvantageous position. "I'm not a Jedi," he replied, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had found his true path. "And I'm not a Sith. I'm something you never anticipated in all your scheming. Someone who embraces both light and darkness without being consumed by either." He could feel Palpatine's fear now, the Sith Lord's prescient abilities showing him his own death approaching like an inevitable wave. In desperation, Sidious tried to collapse the entire room, bringing tons of structure down on them both, but Anakin's power had grown beyond such crude attacks. He reached out with the Force and simply stopped the collapse, holding the building's mass suspended through pure will while simultaneously disarming Palpatine with a cut that sent the red blade spinning into the darkness below. The Sith Lord stumbled backward, his hood falling to reveal the true face beneath, ravaged by dark side corruption and twisted by decades of hatred. "Please," Palpatine gasped, raising his hands in a mockery of surrender. "I'm too weak. Don't kill me. I surrender." Anakin recognized the manipulation immediately, the same tactic Sidious had used to corrupt the Jedi that Mace Windu would have fallen for, but Anakin had no such blindness. He thought of Luke and Leia, of Padme, of every family this creature had destroyed in its quest for power, and his blade descended in a clean arc that ended Darth Bane's lineage forever. Darth Sidious died as he had lived, trying to manipulate his way out of consequences, and his body collapsed to the floor as the dark side's grip on Coruscant loosened for the first time in decades. Anakin stood over the Sith Lord's body, breathing heavily not from exertion but from the weight of what he had done, and reached out through the Force to prevent Order 66 from being executed. He found the command structure, the organic inhibitor chips in the clone soldiers' brains, and with a wave of power that reached across the galaxy, he burned them out, freeing millions of soldiers from their programmed betrayal. The Jedi would live, the Republic would survive, and Anakin Skywalker could finally go home to his family. His destiny as the Chosen One fulfilled not through destruction, but through balance.